Sometimes you're going to have integrals that you're not going to be able to solve. And this right here is one of those integrals. Now, we've learned about some integral properties. We obviously know we can apply algebraic properties. And I actually encourage you to pause the video and try your best to turn this integral into the form x raised to the power n and then solve this. And what you'll realize is that you can't do that. And that is unfortunately not possible. And why is that? Well, the reason for that is because this right here is another special kind of case. And what case is that? Well, this is basically this case right over here. So you're going to have integrals that are in the form that are going to have this certain form, and it's basically going to be, you're going to have two terms inside a bracket, right? Two terms, remember, not three terms, not one term, two terms inside a bracket. One of those terms is going to be a constant, and one of those terms is going to have an x with it. So in our case, we can see b is the constant, and there's a term with x. And remember, it's not x squared, it's not x cubed, it's not x to the power 5, it's just x, plain old x. So again, you're going to have two terms. One of them is going to have an x with them, the other one is not going to have an x. And then the entire thing is going to be raised to some power n. Now, I want you to identify this form whenever you see it, and I want you to kind of memorize this general form, because obviously if you don't know it in your memory, how are you going to identify it? Now the signs over here, you know, the b has a positive sign, and obviously ax doesn't have a sign, so we can assume it's positive. The signs over here can actually change, so it can be negative ax and negative b, or it can be negative ax, positive b, or it can be positive ax and negative b, right? So don't worry about the signs. Just remember this thing, that there's going to be two terms. One of them is going to have an x, the other one isn't, and they're going to be raised to a power. Those are the basically three main things that are going to help you identify forms. So how do we now go ahead and solve this form out? We know how to solve the form x raised to the power n. How do we solve out this form? So this thing basically turns into this thing right over here. And we don't do anything too fancy over here. All we did was we had that bracket, it had a power. All we did was we added 1 into that power, right? And then we divided that entire thing by the power plus 1 multiplied by whatever the coefficient of x is. And of course, don't forget to add your limits. So let's now try out this general form on our example, and let's do that. So we can kind of see that we had this general form of ax plus b raised to the power n. Ax was basically 4x, b was basically 3, and then they were raised to the power n. N in this case was 3. So all we did was we are going to add 1 into that power. We add 1 into the 3, you can see, and then we divide that entire thing by the power, which was 3 plus 1, multiplied by the coefficient of x, which was 4. So, and of course, don't forget to put your limits. And now we can simplify this thing, so it's going to look something like this. Now all we got to do is we just got to apply our limits. So wherever you see an x, you just go ahead and put a 5 over there, and then you minus the lower limit. So wherever you see the x, you go ahead and put the 2 over there, and that's going to look something like this. And once you solve this out, you put this in your calculator, you solve it out, you are going to get the area. So you can actually see the rest of the steps over here are just the same. The only different steps that are in this different general form is that for x raised to the power n, it's solved out to something different. In this case, it solves out to something different. The application of limits remains the same. That it doesn't nothing changes over there. Okay, so now that you know this form, here are some practice questions, and I'd like you guys to try these out. Now I've made these questions difficult enough So hopefully if you sit with these questions, you think on them, you will be able to solve integrals in this form. And remember, doing the integration itself is not the difficult part. The difficult part is identifying what type of form this is and bringing an integral into that form.